Hello, and welcome to the Amongst Romans podcast, your window to everything Italy from an outsider's perspective. Join us each week as we navigate the Italian way of life and all the adventures that come along with it. Today, I'm going to take you on a journey through one of Italy's most underrated towns, at least in my opinion, and that's Genoa. So Genoa, or Genova in Italian, is Italy's sixth largest city and the capital of the Liguria region. As a reference point, that's the northwest part of Italy, if you're not sure where the region is. So other places in Liguria you might be familiar with are, of course, Cinque Terre and the Italian Riviera, which includes towns like Portofino, Santa Margherita Ligure, and San Remo, which is the home of the Italian Music Festival. Genoa has one of the busiest and largest ports in the Mediterranean, and it connects Europe with Asia, North America, and Africa. So often, if you're getting anything shipped to Italy, chances are that it might go through the port of Genoa. The port is also a significant cruise hub, and you'll often see many large cruise ships here, especially during the tourist season. So if you're into the cruising circuit, you probably heard of Genoa, or perhaps you have been here on one of your stops. So despite having a fascinating past and a lot of attractions to offer, Genoa is often overlooked by tourists, those people who prefer to visit places like Rome, Milan, or Florence. And we almost made the mistake of not coming here, but I'm really glad we did. And I think it's such a great destination in Italy that you definitely should consider for your next trip. So what makes Genoa worth visiting? Well, that's what this episode is about. And I really think it's a city that needs more of a spotlight in the whole going to Italy and visiting places of really, really great, culture, history, food. It has to be on that list. So let's dive in. So for a bit of history, Genoa Harbor was filled with fishing boats long before the Roman Empire even rose to power. So again, it's another really old place in Italy that predates the Romans. Throughout the Middle Ages, Genoa became a powerful maritime republic, and it was actually rivaling Venice in its influence over the Mediterranean. The Republic of Genoa controlled extensive territories, including parts of Corsica, Sardinia, and other parts along the Black Sea. It was a very powerful city-state. It had a massive fleet of ships, and it was a very wealthy city because of that. Genoa also has one of the oldest banks in the world, and that bank, the Bank of St. George, was founded in 1407. It played a very crucial role in financing the city's naval expeditions and trade. And it's what made Genoa become an economic powerhouse in those days. So Genoa is also the birthplace of the famous explorer Christopher Columbus. While Columbus later sailed under the Spanish flag, his maritime ambitions were influenced by his early years in Genoa. You can even visit what is believed to be his childhood home near Porta Sobrana. And no matter how you feel about him as a person, I think it's an interesting place to explore. Now, I say it's believed to be his home because there is some controversy around where Christopher Columbus was actually from. If you're curious about finding out, I encourage you to do some research online. It's actually quite interesting. But anyway, back to Genoa. Another great reason to come here is its historic center. So Genoa has one of the largest historic centers in Europe, and it was recognized as the UNESCO World Heritage Site. So this designation also includes the Palazzi dei Roli on Via Garibaldi, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So Genoa's historic center kind of reminded me of Naples. It's a bit similar in that the alleys are very narrow and some go up hills, but it's laid out slightly differently. So the center is more like a maze of medieval alleys, and they're known as the carrugi, and it's very easy to get lost in them, and that was designed on purpose. So again, Genoa was a very powerful city with lots of money. People were trying to attack and invade. And the design of the streets meant to confuse and disorient anyone trying to invade and give the locals a bit of an advantage during an attack. So I definitely recommend doing a walking tour that takes you through this part of town. You'll get a chance to learn about the history and not get lost. It's a lot easier to navigate the streets after somebody has walked you through them. Otherwise, they might seem a little off-putting or somewhat, I wouldn't say unsafe, but some of them might seem, as a person coming there familiar with the language, they might be a bit off-putting, but they really aren't. So take a tour with a guide, and I think you will get a better feel for it so you can later on go along by yourself. Let's talk about some of the key historical landmarks in Genoa that I think you should explore. One of them is Cathedral of San Lorenzo. This cathedral is a symbol of Genoa and features a blend of Romanesque and Gothic styles. It's a very opulent Baroque interior. You can't miss it because it has this striking black and white striped marble. Inside, there are a few religious artifacts, and one of them is the Sacro Catino, which is believed to be the Holy Grail. If you're up for that, I encourage you to check it out. Another church you might want to stop by is the Chiesa de Gesù. It's really a Baroque masterpiece. So this church, again, has works by Rubens and has a connection to, again, back to those days of Genoa being a very, very powerful and influential city-state. You know, it was a place where a lot of artists were coming down and working. Again, money influences art. So a lot of artists like Rubens and Van Dyck came to work there, and you can find their works, their paintings in many different museums and churches across the city. Another place to explore is the Porta Soprana. This is the only gate to the city with these big circular towers, and it's the only gate left of the old city walls. So this particular one goes back to the 9th century, and through it, you can really get a glimpse of, medieval Genoa and what it was like to come here in that time and come across these massive towers. It's really quite incredible. There's like a park around it now, which is very different from what it was back in the day. Another place to explore is the Via Garibaldi. This is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Here you'll find the Palazzi dei Rolli, which I mentioned earlier. It's a collection of elegant Renaissance and Baroque palaces that were built by these powerful Genoese families. So I recommend visiting the Palazzo Rosso Bianco and the Palazzo Doria Tursi. All of them are functioning now as museums, except for the Doria Tursi, which is Genoese town hall. And here you can find collections of masters, Italian masters in particular, including Caravaggio. Then you also have Van Dyck and Rubens. So we went on a tour of the Palazzo Rosso and Palazzo Bianco. You can get a combined ticket. And Palazzo Rosso is known for stunning frescoes, and it also has a panoramic rooftop. The Palazzo Bianco has an extensive collection of European paintings. So again, anything from like 14th to 18th centuries. Now, if you go to the Palazzo Doria Tursi, here you can find certain historical artifacts as well, including the violin that was owned by Paganini. So if you're into musical history, this is a great place to stop by. Another place you probably find yourself while you are in Genoa is the Piazza de' Ferrari. This is another must-stop place in Genoa, and the name has nothing to do with the Italian car. It's a really big square with really nice buildings around it. You'll easily recognize it because, again, it's a big piazza, and there is a big, really big fountain that you really can't miss. There's lots of beautiful buildings around it. The fountain is really nice, and it's a place where you can stop by, have a little break, and enjoy, the world pass you by and do some people watching. It's a very central hub, so you'll likely end up here at some point. Now, let's talk about the distinct style of architecture that you'll find in Genoa that I personally haven't seen in other parts of Italy. So again, the architecture here is very unique, and it's characterized by painted facades. You have a lot of buildings with painted windows or painted doors, and you'll also find a lot of striped marble buildings. So again, the Genoese were very adept at reusing existing structures and the building materials. So they often expanded and transformed the city around them using what was around them. They used patterns and color to create a very unique style that is different from other Italian cities. You might also notice something else about the architecture here. Like I mentioned, it's the painted windows and doors and decorative features many of the buildings have. And they were meant to create sort of like an illusion, like there is, you'll see a building, you think, oh, that looks like there is marble, like engravings or paintings. And these aren't really that. It's just the painting. So what basically happened was, when Genoa was a very wealthy place, everybody wanted to build a big, massive house to impress neighbors, but not everybody wanted to spend the money to decorate it. So they came up with the idea of paying painters to mimic classical statues and details as a way of cutting down cost, painting the fake windows, the doors, the details. But the windows themselves were also a way to avoid paying higher taxes, which is, again, very interesting and very inventive. So in those days, Genoa was taxing, I guess, owners of buildings based on numbers of windows they had. To be creative, they would paint additional windows instead of adding them onto the building. So you might find a row of 3 windows, but only 2 of them are actual real windows, and the third one is painted just to look the same. This was to save from paying higher taxes. Another part of Genoa that I really enjoyed was walking around the old port, which is called Porto Antico. Genoa has a very old maritime history, and this is a great place to explore. This port has undergone major renovation and was transformed by the architect Renzo Piano. They took an industrial area and transformed it into a lively waterfront district. So today it's very different than what it looked like maybe even a decade ago. And again, it's filled with markets, there's coffee shops, bars, especially in the summer, there's patios, and you can walk around the waterfront and enjoy breeze. So what can you find to do around here? One of the big things I think might be of interest is the Aquarium of Genoa. It's one of the largest in Europe. And again, it's not just an aquarium when you walk in. It's a massive complex with really interesting setups. You have lots of different fish species and different marine life. It's really interesting to explore, especially with the interactive exhibits. And if you are there with kids, that's probably also a great place to explore. Another thing I would recommend is visiting the Maritime Museum. Lots of history with, maritime and shipbuilding. And I think that museum is really interesting. If you're visiting and you want to learn more about Genoa's past, I think that is really a great place to do that. While you are in the Porto, you can also find a replica of a 17th century Spanish galleon. It's this big, massive ship, and it's called Vascello Neptune. And it was actually built for the film Pirates. It was directed by Roman Polanski. And again, now it's a unique attraction in the harbor. Further down is a biosphere, which is a glass and steel structure, and inside you'll find a little tropical ecosystem. So it's almost like visiting a little peaceful oasis in the heart of the city. And again, you can explore different plants and animal species, which is, again, very interesting and I would say unexpected in a big city like Genoa. If you are in that area, don't miss it's called Bigo, and it's an elevator shaped like a ship's crane that offers panoramic views of the city and the sea. I think this is really good to do, especially if you're there on a clear day and you can actually enjoy the views. So speaking of the views, I recommend you head to the Spianata Castelletto. It's a viewpoint on top of the hill. Like there, you have to take either lots of steps or a lift. Ascensore del Castello. It's a castle lift. It's a Art Nouveau elevator, and it was built in 1909. It's quite an experience. Unfortunately, when we were there, it was closed, so we had to do the hike, which was still nice, especially if you're looking for some exercise, but there's a lot of steps to get there. So once you get on top, there's some benches, there's lots of people hanging out and, taking the views. It's a great place to explore. There's some coffee shops and stores not too far. It's not like on the strip, but you have to kind of walk around. So if you want to look for a place to enjoy the views, especially at sunset, I think that's a great place to go. Okay, so now let's talk about food. If you're a foodie, then Genoa is definitely the destination for you. So what can you find in Genoa? Genoa is the birthplace of the famous pesto. So pesto is made with fresh basil, pine nuts, parmesan, garlic, and olive oil, and it's all blended together. I wouldn't call it like a sauce. It's more of like a paste that you can add to pasta or spread over bread. I personally am not a huge fan of pesto, but I found that when we were in Genoa, it tasted a bit different. So maybe it's also, coming from the source. But I would recommend if you are in Genoa to trying that. And again, you can get it mixed with many different pastas, and I prefer it that way. Another thing that I think you should try is the focaccia. So focaccia is this flat bread that's sort of topped with olive oil and herbs. It's a bit more spongy and often very greasy. And you can find it with different options. Sometimes there's some herbs in it. Sometimes there's onion. Sometimes it's just salt and some herbs on it. And it's really nice to eat. Again, there's different versions of focaccia in different parts. I think in Puglia, they have one with some tomatoes in it. It's a bit different. So if you want to try the local bread, go for that. Farinata is another savory dish. It's a chickpea pancake. It's sort of crispy on the outside and soft, warm in the center. So again, those are more savory snacks if you want to try them. And of course, Genoa being a seaport has a lot of different seafood options. So anchovies are big here. There's stews, there's, just fish dishes. I really recommend trying the local food. I would not recommend eating pizza in this area. You can still find pizza if you want. I just think that if you're going for authentic local vibes, pizza is not the place I would have in Genoa. I would go with seafood pastas. I would go with the focaccia. I would go with the pesto. Those are the local specialties, and I'm sure different restaurants offer different versions of that. And if you really like markets, I would recommend going to Mercato Orientale. And that's a perfect place if you want to just look at the local ingredients or buy some local delicacies. And again, it's a great place to explore, especially if you just want to see what kind of stuff they're selling here. So now let's talk about how you actually get to Genoa. It's actually very well connected to other parts of Italy, and there's an airport you can get to. Of course, the airport is called Cristoforo Colombo, and it's actually located not far from the city center. The airport offers direct flights from other major European cities, and it's fairly easy to get to. You can also take the train. Genoa is well served by the extensive rail system and actually has two stations. There's Genova Piazza Principe and Genova Brignole, and both are within walking distance of many popular attractions. You can also get here by a ferry. If you were coming from a cruise ship or taking a ferry from Corsica or Sardinia, you can come here and explore Genoa from the ferry. We actually end up driving to Genoa. It's a big city, fairly easy to get to. However, if you are inside the city, as any other big city, there's going to be traffic, especially during peak hours. You might also have some challenges finding parking in the city center. Some areas are limited to traffic, so that's going to limit some of your options. So again, it's also a good idea to probably find a parking garage and then explore on foot. Genoa is very easy to get around, and you can really do a lot of walking, especially in the old town, because again, small narrow alleys, you can't really drive around. So if you want to just go for a nice walk and explore, I think it's a perfect time to do it. Now let's talk about best time to visit. I've always said that summer is very hot. Even though Genoa is a bit further up north than, let's say, Rome, it still gets pretty hot in the summer. So I would say go in either fall, like now is a good time to go. It might be a bit more rainy, but you'll also get a bit of a more authentic experience. Like I said, Genoa isn't overrun with tourists. I think it might be changing a little because when people come on cruise ships, a lot of them might go on tours within Genoa, or they might be getting off in Genoa and going to other places. So I think that will create some more curiosity for people who might have not been aware of Genoa and where it is. So again, I think it's a city that You will find a lot busier in summertime and maybe not as busy off season. I think if you come outside of summer, again, the weather would be a bit more bearable. It's not going to be as boiling hot. You might get more rain if you come in the fall or early winter. But, there's a lot of stuff to explore inside. There's lots of museums, there's lots of palazzos and lots of other things to see that you're not going to really miss out if you come in winter as opposed to coming in the summer. So there you go. So what makes Genoa really worth visiting? Well, for me, again, I love architecture, I love history, I love culture museums, and Genoa has all of that. Even if you're not into all of those things, you will find something to love. It's also a foodie destination. So if you love food and if you love Italian food, Genoa is again a great place to explore because it offers a taste of local foods that were invented in Genoa or have been created here. And those are very unique flavors that, you'll find in other parts of Italy, but again, they came from here, so they're very unique. Unfortunately, Genoa doesn't seem to be on everybody's itinerary, and I think that's really a miss because it's such a great city and it has so much to offer that I really think if you are into visiting Italy and learning more about the country and the people and the history, Genoa is a great place to visit because it offers you a different type of side of Italy. It offers you a different look because it's very different from a city like Rome or Florence or Venice. It has its own unique history. It has its own influence, its own sort of unique identity. And it's a different type of Italy that you don't always get to see. So I think it's also, as I said, a great place to explore another part of Italy and learn something new about the country. Especially if you're looking to explore the Liguria region, it's a great place to set up as your base and explore. I hope you enjoyed my take on Genoa, and if you want to read more about the city and what you can find here, I'm going to leave a link to the post I wrote about it so you can check it out. So next time you come to Italy, I hope you add Genoa to your itinerary and discover a different part of the country that a lot of people just seem to pass by. And don't be those people. Come to Genoa. And this brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and review on whatever you're listening right now. We'll be back next week, so stay tuned.